Our first contestant, David Kincaid, no cash value. No cash value, David Kincaid.
Worthless, shiftless, lazy, good for nothing. I have been called all of those things, and rightly so. At times, I have felt as worthless as this arcade token. It even says, no cash value, right on it. Have you ever felt worthless? Maybe you have. But I have found a secret power in this valueless coin. A power that can lift you up and move you forward if you understand the secret. And tonight, I'm going to share that secret with you and how it can change your life. It's a secret that I call no cash value. Mr. Contest Master, fellow Toastmasters and honored guests, friends. I first have to tell you that I grew up the youngest of 11 children. My mother made minimum wage, didn't bring home a lot of money, but she did okay and obviously kept me well fed. But I was the ungrateful child. I couldn't understand why we didn't have the nicer things like my friends at school. And my rich Uncle Arthur, he had his own airplane. Once, when I was 5 years old, we went out to the airport to see his airplane. And I got to sit in the pilot seat. And as I sat there and my tiny little hands gripped the controls, I became wide-eyed with wonder and giddy with glee. And I turned to my mother and I said, "Mama, I want to be a pilot when I grow up." And I'll never forget what she said to me then. "Oh, David," she said, "you can't be a pilot. Only rich people can be pilots." Now, I know she didn't want to hurt me. She loved me. She wanted the best for me, but her words on that day shaped my life. For at that moment, I clearly understood that I had a place that I could never rise above. That my dreams would go unfulfilled because I was not worthy of them. It was as if I had no cash value. Now, I'm not going to try to tell you that my life was all heartache and disappointment after that. It wasn't. I became a pretty fair trombone player. And that got me a scholarship to a really good college, so off I went. But I blew that and dropped out. After that, I got some pretty good jobs as an optician, making eyeglasses. But after a couple of years on each job, I either quit or was fired. I couldn't finish things I started. I always had an excuse to fail. After all, I had no cash value. Now, I would like to tell you that there was a day, an epiphany, when light shone from the heavens, and the clouds opened, and the choir sang, and my life changed forever. Didn't happen. No, my life did change, but slowly, over a long period of time, and only with the help of good friends and colleagues and family who supported my dreams. I went back to college, and this time I finished, and that success has led to others. I have now been at the same optical practice for almost 20 years, and I am at the top of my profession as an optician. Also, I helped establish, and I'm on the board of directors of the premier eye care charity in the Midwest. But best of all, I joined Toastmasters. And at one Toastmasters meeting, the table topics question was to reach into a bag and pull out a random coin and talk about it. Okay, don't get ahead of me here, stay with me. This is going to be easy. All I have to do is talk about the name of the president or the date that's on the coin. So I reach into the bag, and what did I pull out? Yeah, you guessed it. Say it with me. No cash value. What followed was 1 minute and 1 second of rambling crutch words strung together in a stream of nonsense. You were there. But later that night, the secret of this coin began to become clear. It has no cash value. It's worthless. But didn't its creator make this coin for a purpose? It has a different kind of value. It can be traded for a service. And when it is, it realizes its true value. And that is the secret of the coin. It represents my true value. I keep it in my pocket. And when my fingers touch it, its power reminds me that my value was always here, inside me, waiting to be discovered, just as with the coin. And now, I challenge each of you to find your coin. Look around you right now. Look at your friends and colleagues, and think of your families and of the value that they place upon your hopes and dreams, for that is your true value. But for this to work in your lives, you must pass this secret along. Literally, pay it forward. Tell someone about the hopes and dreams that they have and the faith that you have in them. Remember that little boy in that airplane so many years ago, all wide-eyed with wonder and giddy with glee. What if someone like you had shown him the secret of the coin and of the power of believing in your dreams? Where would he be now? And to prove the point, I want one of you to have this coin. Oh, but don't worry, I have another one. And I keep it right here beside my pilot's license.
Awesome.
Our second speaker, David Evans, Happiness. Happiness, David Evans.
Please raise your hand if a person or circumstance has made you unhappy. Thank you. Tonight, I am going to tell you a secret. No person or circumstance has the power to make you unhappy. You have the power to choose your attitude in any set of circumstances. Mr. Contest Master, for most of my life, I did not know I had this power. As a matter of fact, I knew the opposite. I knew people and circumstances had the power to make me unhappy. It happened all the time. As a child, I was constantly reminded of how ugly and stupid I was. Even though it's been more than 50 years, I can remember my spot on the first grade playground. Where the cyclone fence met the brick wall, that was my corner. That is where I stood and was harassed by the other children. I once had a teacher announce to the entire classroom, "David, I don't know what grade to give you. There is no grade lower than F." I hated school, I hated my life, and I loathed myself. But there was one bright spot in my life, and that was my mother. When I had a bad day, we would talk, and I would feel better. But then, on Easter Sunday morning, when I was 10 years old, my mother died. A horrible, painful death from neurofibromatosis. She spent the last 2 years of her life in agony. I went to my father for emotional support, and all he said was, "Life is tough, then you die." I hope you can understand my total falling apart. And then think back to when you were a 10-year-old child. Now, imagine you have this disorder that's causing tumors to grow all over your body, literally head to toe. And now, your mother dies of that same disorder. Can you feel my devastation? Like my mother, I have neurofibromatosis. Neurofibromatosis, or NF for short, is a genetic disorder that causes tumors to grow anywhere in or on the body. It can also cause severe pain, deafness, blindness, cancer, and death. In addition, more than 60% of the individuals with NF have brain damage, and I am one of those. There's only one certainty with NF. It only becomes worse. A couple of years ago, it became painful when I used hairspray. More recently, I have been having pain in my left arm and left side. I can not straighten my left thumb. My mother died from NF at 38. My sister died from NF at 48. The average life expectancy for someone with NF is 57. But I am a survivor. I've reached the great age of 61. In addition, I have found the key to happiness. Happiness does not come from fame or fortune. Think of all the wealthy, famous people you have heard of who've ruined their lives or have committed suicide with drugs and alcohol. They had everything, but they were not happy. Happiness comes from within ourselves. Happiness comes from our thoughts about life, about other people, and about ourselves. Happiness comes from our thoughts about circumstances, not circumstances themselves. For example, has anyone here ever been driving down the highway and then been cut off by another driver, forcing you to jam on the brakes? Has that ever happened to anyone? If it's never happened to you, go drive in Chicago. I guarantee it will happen. But when this happens, you can become angry. Natural response. Or you could be thankful that you were able to avoid that car accident. I learned this from a fascinating book, Man's Search for Meaning, by Dr. Viktor Frankl. This book changed my life. Dr. Frankl was a Jewish psychiatrist who spent more than 3 years in Nazi concentration camps under the most deplorable conditions you could imagine. Imagine your bed is a wood box that you share with so many other people you cannot turn in your sleep. Imagine each day you are fed just barely enough to keep you alive and working. When you're no longer able to work, you're killed immediately. But even under these extreme conditions, some men found the power to choose happiness. These men were able to do this by finding a meaning to life. They realized that each of them was unique in the universe. They realized that each of them and each and every one of you was created by God Himself for a special purpose. A purpose only you can fulfill. This knowledge will give you the power to choose your attitude in any circumstance. When a circumstance or a person makes you feel unhappy, remember those men in the Nazi concentration camp who found the power to choose happiness. Each and every one of you has that same power. I urge you, choose happiness. Mr. Toastmaster.
Dan Darnall. The glue that binds. The glue that binds, Dan Durnell.
Have you ever used one of those little bottles of super glue? Did you have fun getting your fingers apart? What about you? There was an iconic commercial with a construction worker that would put a dot of glue on his helmet, and to show the bonding power of super glue, he would hang from an I-beam. Anybody remember that commercial? Contest master, fellow Toastmasters, most welcome guests. There is a glue that bonds deeper than super glue. It bonds to the depths of our soul. It is the bond that we have with those special people in our lives. It is the bond that we have with those people that have helped make us who we are. They are part of our lives, and we are part of their lives. A special person in my life was my father. I didn't see much of my father growing up. He worked 6 nights out of 7. I did see a lot of the bottom of his feet as he was sleeping and I was leaving for school. Sunday was our day. We tried to spend as much time as possible. It was the time that he taught me, tried to teach me life's lessons. We loved to wrestle. We'd wrestle until the one time he put a leg lock around my waist and I stood up with him still around my waist. He quickly said that we needed to stop before someone got hurt. I learned that you had to give and take to be successful in life. There was a great hill just around the corner from my childhood home. One weekend, it snowed, blanketing the area with a thick coat of white. My dad said, "Let's go sled riding." We grabbed our sleds and marched through the snow. When we got to the top of the hill, I challenged my dad to a race. 1, 2, 3, go! In Olympic fashion, we hurled ourselves down the hill, going faster and faster. About halfway down, our sleds locked, bonding us together, causing us to go even faster. We hit a bump at the bottom of the hill and became airborne. Everything seemed to move in slow motion until, bang! With one bounce, we ended up in the bushes across the street. We rolled off our sleds, breathing heavy as our life flashed in front of our eyes. We looked at each other, smiled, and said, "Let's do it again!" It's great to have someone to share life's challenges with. It makes those events seem more memorable and exciting. Later in life, I had the opportunity to go fishing with my father on a regular basis. He was young at heart. He would sit in the bow of the boat, eyes bright and wide, his smile even wider. As we broke through the waves or the wake of the other boats, I could almost hear him giggling. This taught me that, when we come up against life's obstacles, we need to keep smiling as we break through them. My dad always thought of everyone else, bringing happy and joy to everyone. I lost my dad to cancer about 15 years ago. Even in those last moments, he was worried about others. He made me promise to take care of my mom. I miss my dad. I can only hope to live up to his example. Think for a moment about that someone special in your life. When you go home tomorrow, call, better yet, go see that person. Give them a big hug and thank them for who they are. If you're in the same situation as I am with my father, think about those events that bonded you together. Put your arms around those memories and don't let go. Those memories are the glue that binds. Contest master.
Our fourth contestant, Alan Kirby, A Bedtime Story. A Bedtime Story, Alan Kirby.
My son Teddy is 14 years old now, and as many of you know, he really loves to help me prepare for speech contests. So I asked him what I should talk about this year. Dad, tell a story about a cat. So here we go, Teddy's cat story. I grew up in fear, not of my parents, Mr. Contest Master. It wasn't my teachers I was scared of, fellow Toastmasters. And friends, it wasn't even the bully that lived across the street. I grew up in fear of our big black tomcat, Barky. He wasn't always big. When I was 4 years old, my mom came home with this tiny, cute kitten. I thought it was fun to carry him around by the neck, chase him with my squirt gun, or dress him up in my sister's doll clothes. Unfortunately for me, Barky remembered. A few months later, he was 20 pounds of lean muscle, giant golden eyes, and lightning reflexes. He started taking his revenge with his trademark ambush, hiding behind a doorway, and as soon as I walked through, bam, he would jump me from behind. These weren't vicious attacks generally, just enough to keep me in total fear and always wearing Band-Aids. His real attacks, he saved up for the cats and dogs that were unlucky enough to live in our neighborhood. Growing up, my sister and I learned that Barky had 3 rules. Rule number 1, no eyeballing. If you made direct eye contact with this animal, he would chase you down. He found this disrespectful. 2, do not touch the back legs unless you wanted stitches. And rule number 3, whatever you did, the thing he hated most, more than anything else, do not blow in his face. My parents warned me to never do this, so of course I wanted to try it. One morning when I was in the 3rd grade, I didn't want to go to school, so I told my mom I was sick. She took my temperature. Normal. I had to go. Desperate, I pointed to Barky sleeping peacefully on his rug. I said it wasn't fair that he got to sleep in while I had to go to school. Mom ignored me and went back to her makeup. Angry, I looked over at Barky again. I was 9 years old now. Time to show him who the man of the family was. So I got down on all 4s and woke him up. And there we were, nose to nose. His eyes were fiery coals of anger. His ears were pinned back flat, and a low growl warned me to back off. But now I was stuck. If I back down now, he'd bite me anyway. I didn't know what to do. So he struck like a cobra, locked his claws behind my ears, pulled my face into his, and sank his fangs deep into my cheek. Blood was spraying everywhere. I went screaming to my mom, "Barky bit me!" She asked me what I'd done to him. I was just sitting there eating my cereal, Mama, when he just came at me for no reason. Mom chased Barky out of the house with a broom and gave me a roll of paper towels to absorb the blood. Now I said I was bleeding too much to go to school. But Mom said just to hold the paper towels to my face, and eventually it would stop. And a few hours later it did. I never directly challenged Barky's authority again. However, when I was 15 years old, my cousin Rick did. Barky was asleep on our Lazy Boy recliner, and Rick wanted the chair, but I told him, best just let Barky keep the seat. Instead, he flipped Barky with a dish towel and laughed while Barky ran off. He boasted it was all just a matter of showing Barky who was boss. About 20 minutes later, I spotted Barky sneaking up from behind. Somehow I neglected to inform him in time of what was about to happen. Barky launched himself like a missile at Rick's head, anchored his claws in the face, fangs piercing the scalp, while the back claws, like a jackhammer, shredded the back of his neck into hamburger. Rick was running around, screaming and crying, with a cat stuck to his head. Suddenly, my living room was Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. It was great. Finally, Barky jumped down and went back to his Lazy Boy. Rick was yelling and cussing that he didn't have to put up with this, that he was going to go out and find a stick. But one look at Barky's, "Go ahead, make my day." Look, and Rick just laid down and bled for a while until I could get a box of Band-Aids attached to his head. Barky still had it. A few years later, my senior year of high school, I came home late from a date, and until I heard a meow come out of the bathroom, I had forgotten. Barky was laying in the tub on an old blanket. He was thin now. Cancer had ravaged his once powerful body. But with all of his strength, he came towards me. And for the first time ever, he let me break rule number 1. While I held him, I looked directly into his eyes while he purred. He passed away the next morning. A bedtime story for my 14-year-old son this has turned out to be. One that he likes to hear most every night now. It doesn't always work, but some nights, with some luck, he is distracted from his normal nighttime worries. Worries about seizures, about hospital visits, or school. No worries tonight. He's happy. Good night, Teddy. Love you.
Contestant number 5, Siddharshan Anadan. The words of evil. The words of evil, Siddharshan Anadan.
Have you ever experienced pure joy? A moment of pure happiness which you hope will last forever? One of my earliest moments of pure joy was in the year 2001 when I was able to obtain a copy of Diablo 2, a computer game, for 50 cents on the black market. I couldn't wait to go home and spend a few hours every night vanquishing the evil demons from hell. No, my grandfather said, kids should not play computer games. Back in those days, we used to go outside and play on the street. Now go outside and play. It was so unfair. Back in those days, my grandfather didn't have a computer. Why else would he go outside to play? Because of that, I have to suffer? This was just the beginning. Respected contest chair, fellow Toastmasters and guests. As you can see, my grandfather was an old-fashioned man. Even in the 21st century, he washed his clothes the old-fashioned way, using brutal high-velocity impact against a rock. One day I asked him, isn't it easier to use the washing machine? Machines don't wash clothes, people wash clothes. This was how things were done back in those days, when the world was a better place, he said. But how? I asked. Back in those days, you had World War II. People would die of a common cold. You had no electricity, automobiles, computers, or the washing machine. He looked me in the eye and said, listen, back in those days, kids did not question their elders. Now go away. Frustrated, I went to my mother for advice. Mom, is it true that back in those days, the world was a better place? Of course it was, she said. Then I asked, so did you guys do something really stupid? Because the world is so messed up now. She looked me in the eye and said, stop bothering me and go away. I grew up hating those words. Back in those days. The words of evil, I called them. I was sick of listening to people complain that back in those days, food was tastier, water was cleaner, the air was less polluted, the grass was greener, and the government was equally stupid. Well, some things don't change, but everything else was better. Why? I don't know. Go away. I came to the logical conclusion. People are idiots. I just have to tolerate them. After many years of tolerating idiots, one day I came home after an exceptionally long research meeting. I just wanted to sit back, relax, and listen to some good music. I put on MTV. There was no music on MTV. Instead, they had this unbelievably horrible reality show called Teen Mom about kids who made bad choices in high school. It was so bad that watching it, I could literally feel my IQ dropping 50 points. What has this world come to? A teenager gets drunk, he gets punished. A teenager gets pregnant, she gets to star in her own reality show and make more money than I do. Back in those days, MTV actually played good music and the world was a better place. I had just used the words of evil. The same 4 words which had frustrated me all these years. Is it possible that due to the influence of people around me, I too have become an idiot? Or is the world actually getting worse and there's nothing I can do about it? I was so confused. I was 23 years old and having a midlife crisis. I did what people with problems generally do. I posted them on Facebook. People said, if you don't like MTV, just change the channel and stop spamming my wall. I tried to change the channel, but it was so hard. Deep down, a little voice kept saying, back in those days, you always watched MTV. That's when it dawned on me. Back in those days, the world wasn't necessarily a better place, But my life was definitely better. School was easier. I had no responsibilities. My needs were simple and my parents took care of everything. What I really want is for those carefree days to return. But life moves on. I have to move on. And moving on doesn't mean forgetting the past, but learning from it. The world doesn't get better or worse, it just changes. It is better to adapt to the change. Complaining doesn't help anyone. Chained by the past, fearful of the future, I was unable to enjoy the present. Have you ever felt this way? If so, it's time to move on. I vow, from now on, I will not allow the words of evil to control my life. I will not use tradition as an excuse to keep myself or other people from trying something new. I will never, ever, ever watch MTV again. And just like that, the world became a better place. Ladies and gentlemen, life is an experiment where we turn past experiences into wisdom for the future. The words of evil are a hurdle, they need to be crossed. It's not easy, but remember, a wise man once said, if at first you don't succeed, just have some Jack Daniels and try again.
Okay, everybody, here are the results. Our third place winner in the International Speech Contest goes to David Kincaid. David. Second place goes to Ellen Kirby. And the first place goes to Sudarshan Ananda. Pictures of the winners will be taken at the media wall in a few minutes. And congratulations to all three of you, and congratulations to all five who presented today in this speech contest. Wonderful job.